Welcome back, everyone. In the last video, we talked about what is a polynomial and how to classify polynomials. Now in this video, we're going to talk about adding and subtracting polynomials. So we're still in Chapter 8, Section 1, but we're going to take the idea of polynomials and now do some algebra with it. The key idea is that adding polynomials involves adding like terms. As a reminder, like terms have the same variable and the same exponent. So an example of like terms might be 2x cubed and 8x cubed because they're both the variable x and they're both the exponent of 3. So when you're adding polynomials, or if it says find the sum, we know that means the answer to an addition problem, you're going to be finding any terms that are like terms. So for example, on A, you're looking at the 2x squared and the negative 4x squared. Those two are like terms because they both have x squared in them. So you just look at the numbers in the front. So you think 2 minus 4 makes negative 2. So that's your new answer for that variable. It's now negative 2x squared. You keep the variable and the exponent the same, you just combine the coefficients. Then you're going to look at the next power down. I usually just like to work from the highest power down to the lowest power to keep my work kind of organized. Then I look at 5x plus 6x, that makes 11x. And last but not least, negative 7 plus 3 makes negative 4. You don't have to, but I do like to put my answers in standard form from highest power to lowest power, just not only for practice, but also some questions will say you have to put your answer in standard form. Now let's look at another example. We're adding a polynomial with 3 terms. It's cubic because the highest power is 3, and it's a trinomial because of the 3 terms. To another polynomial, it's also cubic because the highest power is 3, but this one has 4 terms. So another way you can do this is to line up your like terms vertically. So I like to put them both in standard form, and whenever you're missing a power, you would put in a 0 there. Because when you have no y squareds, that's the same thing as saying 0 y squared. So in the first polynomial, I added in that 0y squared so that I could have it lined up with the 4y squared from the other polynomial. Then I just add down. So once you have your like terms all lined up, then you can just add them together vertically. So for example, 1y cubed plus 2y cubed makes 3y cubed. 0y squared plus 4y squared equals 4y squared. 3y minus 4y makes negative 1y. Negative 5 plus 8 equals 3. You have to remember that you're keeping the variable and the exponent the exact same. Think about if you have 1 apple plus 2 apples, you get 3 apples. You don't get 3 apples squared. You don't change anything about that variable. You're only changing the number in the front. So when you're adding together 1y cubed plus 2y cubed, it makes 3, and it's still y cubed. It doesn't make y to the 6th or y to the 9th. You're not changing the variable at all. You're just adding together the coefficients in the front. Now let's do an example where we're subtracting. So you'll notice on this one, you have a quadratic trinomial because it's power 2, 3 terms. And you're subtracting another quadratic trinomial, power 2, 3 terms. Okay. So when you're subtracting, you have to make sure that you subtract everything in that polynomial because it's in parentheses. So when you have that parentheses, it's saying you have to subtract the entire thing. So one way that you can do this is to distribute the negative sign as if it's a negative 1. So when you distribute the negative, you think, okay, what's negative 1 times 4? That makes negative 4. Negative 1 times negative 5 makes positive 5. Negative 1 times positive 3x squared would make negative 3x squared. Once you distribute the negative sign, then it becomes exactly like adding polynomials where you just put together the like terms. you can drop the parentheses and just look for the highest power first. 2x squared minus 3x squared makes negative 1x squared. Then the next power down is the linear term. The negative 2x and the minus 4x makes the negative 6x. And finally, the constants together, 3 and 5, makes 8. When you have a negative 1x squared, we know that we can drop that 1 because anything times 1 is just going to be itself. So you can just write that as negative x squared minus 6x plus 8. So your final answer was also a quadratic, power of 2, and it's also a trinomial where it has 3 terms. Okay, last but not least, I'm going to show you the vertical method on subtracting. So what you're going to do is whenever you have one polynomial and you're subtracting another polynomial, notice it's in parentheses, so that means you're subtracting this entire polynomial. If you want, you can line it up vertically. So put it in standard form, just like as if you were adding them together. And if there's a power missing, like the first polynomial didn't have a quadratic term, you're going to put a 0 for that term, so 0p squared. But when you line these up, you have to remember that that minus sign is going to every term. So when you're taking 4p cubed minus 0p cubed, that's an easy one, 4p cubed. But then here's where people make mistakes when they're doing their vertical method. So if you're going to do vertical method, you just have to remember that it's all subtracting. You're doing 0p squared minus 3p squared. So 0 minus 3 makes negative 3. Then similarly here, 7p minus negative 9p makes positive 16, because when you're subtracting a negative, you actually could think of that as adding. So think of it 7 plus 9 makes positive 16. And last but not least, negative 8 minus a positive 2, think of it like negative 8 minus 2 makes negative 10. So then you can write out your final answer, and I like to put it in standard form like I said. Okay, now I want you to try a subtracting one on your own, so go ahead and pause. You're welcome to pick horizontal or vertical method, whatever you liked better. And finally, here's the final answer for that. I showed my work with the horizontal method, but if you did the vertical method, you should get the exact same answer, regardless of what method you chose. So that wraps up adding and subtracting polynomials. In the next lesson, we're going to look at multiplying polynomials together. See you then. Bye, guys.